Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming tonight. Today is a Union Day presentation on discrimination in the workplace with a special guest of Chelsey Glasson. If you're interested in getting more involved in organizing around issues that are talked about today, please fill out the survey. We'll post it in chat, and we'll also send it in a follow-up email after the event. So after a couple of words from me and Mayuri, we're then going to have about a 20-minute presentation from Chelsey to hear her story. We'll follow it up with a breakout room discussion so we can dig into these issues a little bit deeper. And then we'll close out the meeting with some quick actions that you could take after the fact if you're interested in getting more involved. Before we go any further, we did want to say that we will be talking about difficult issues during today's Union Day event. So please take a break if and when you need it. And with that, I'm going to hand things off to Mayuri. Thank you.
So discrimination continues to happen at Alphabet. A few examples: Emmy Nietfield shared her story in the New York Times about reporting harassment by a colleague. Farah's a TVC worker had to fight for 3 years to get his badge with his name on it, while continuing to be dead named at work. Just last month, a Googler was stopped by security guards because they didn't believe that he was an employee. These stories are just the ones that are making the news. How many other Emmys, Ferrises, and Angels are out there continuing to work while they face harassment and discrimination in the workplace, or quitting because they didn't have the support that they needed? Alphabet settled a lawsuit filed by shareholders for mishandling sexual conduct, but what about the workers who actually deal with the discrimination and harassment? In this moment, there is a growing consciousness around workplace issues as we are seeing workers across the country on strike, including our union siblings at CWA, the healthcare workers at Catholic Health in Buffalo, New York, UAW John Deere workers, Warrior Met coal workers in Alabama who have been on strike for over half a year now. 1,400 Kellogg workers went on strike. IATSE Hollywood workers, Kaiser workers recently went on strike. Nabisco had a strike earlier in the month. So it's Striketober and we're ready to fight back. Now with that spirit of worker power and fighting back, let's welcome Chelsey Glasson, a former Googler who has been fighting for justice after experiencing pregnancy discrimination. She's currently suing Google, alleging that she had been discriminated against while pregnant and witnessed others being treated similarly. When she spoke up about it, she faced retaliation from her manager. Let's hear her story. Please welcome Chelsey.
Thank you for that intro, Mayuri. Thank you all for joining this discussion, and a thank you to the Alphabet Workers Union for hosting this event. I have prepared a few remarks that I'm going to be reading off of. I'm going to get a little bit vulnerable with all of you. I have some tissues here in the event that there are a few tears. I'm a bit of a crier. I can already feel the tears coming. And I'm opening up and sharing some sensitive stories with you because I think they highlight how much whistleblowers like me need resources and protections and support channels. So having said that, I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to get settled in my chair. Okay, then I'm going to share. I told you I'm a crier. Like many of you, I was inspired by whistleblower Frances Haugen's interview on 60 Minutes. I read the testimony she gave to the Senate subcommittee, And I followed the news coverage as business leaders and journalists responded to her claims. As a software engineer with a Harvard MBA, she was confident, knowledgeable, and prepared. Frances came armed with piles of documentation to support her claim that Facebook is putting profits over people and needs to be regulated just like tobacco and opioids. Her words set off a firestorm. Even the politicians were impressed. Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal gushed about her testimony before Congress, both on the Senate floor and to the press. He said to Frances, "You being here really sends a profound message to our nation that one person can really make a difference. One person standing up and speaking out. I think there are other whistleblowers. And in the tech world, you're showing them that there is a way to make this industry more responsible. We will do everything and anything to protect and stop any retaliation against you and any legal action." Wow, right? It seems like whistleblowers are having a moment, particularly women in tech, and especially thanks to Black and LGBTQ women. Of course, there's Dr. Timnit Gebru with her vitally important work about the dangers of racism in AI and her initiatives to bring more diversity and equity in tech. There's Afomo Azoma and her incredible efforts on the Silence No More Act, which was recently signed into law in California. I also want to mention Sophie Zhang, who for years now has been vocal about issues such as Facebook accounts and likes being used to sway elections globally. And there are so many others, we're not aware of them. It's working under the radar. But as I know from my own journey, the reality for whistleblowers is a lot more complicated than it looks on television and in the news. For every Frances, there are many more workers whose story never breaks the noise. And that's even if they decide to come forward in the first place. For every person who files a lawsuit, gives testimony to Congress, or writes an open letter, there are countless others suffering in silence. Afraid of retaliation, fearful of losing their health insurance or immigration status, or worried that speaking up will ruin their careers. And even if they do speak out, they may eventually end up having to surrender under the massive time, effort, and resources required to hold these huge tech companies accountable. Not to mention the emotional impact that comes with being the face of a big issue. I should know the past 3 years of my life that I've spent fighting Google have taken a greater toll on me and my family than I could have ever imagined. Some of you might already know parts of my story. You may have heard that after 5 happy and successful years as a researcher at Google, I made a complaint with HR about my executive boss discriminating against a fellow mother who reported to me. You might know that soon thereafter, I began experiencing retaliation and discrimination myself, and that things only got worse when I became pregnant with my second child. You might have read my open letter titled, "I'm not returning to Google after maternity leave, and here is why," which was ultimately read by over 12,000 Googlers. You may have heard that my experience inspired pregnancy discrimination legislation and that my jury trial against Google will be starting soon in just 2 months. But what you don't know is what speaking out has cost me. And I don't just mean financially, though that part also has not been easy. I'll give you a few examples. Immediately after publishing my open letter, I learned that Google HR found no wrongdoing in my case. Surprise. I then decided to take legal action. That meant first filing a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or the EEOC. I learned that you only have 6 months from the last instance of discrimination to file with the EEOC. So along with caring for my newborn and a toddler and starting a new job at Facebook, the clock was already ticking. It was an overwhelming situation and I needed support. So I hired an attorney to help. I paid that attorney on an hourly basis, and it ended up costing me over $10,000. This is on top of another $10,000 that I had already paid 2 lawyers while I was still employed at Google to try to stop the retaliation. After filing my EEOC complaint, the Google defense machine kicked into high gear. They attacked my character, my work ethic, and they also doubled down on their argument that I deserved the low calibration score I received when I was 4 months into maternity leave and recovering from a difficult pregnancy. In the midst of corresponding with the EEOC, I also learned just how understaffed and under-resourced the agency is. It became increasingly clear that if I was to have any chance at justice, I would need to file a lawsuit. This started me on a process of vetting specialized litigators, which at times felt like being at an hours-long job interview that involved my reliving my trauma over and over and over again. They were also interviewing me to evaluate whether my evidence and demeanor could stand a chance in court. I learned that for most attorneys, going up against a Goliath like Google is a non-starter, no matter how solid the case. And most plaintiffs like me don't have the $500,000 it can take to fund a lawsuit against Google. I needed to find an attorney to work on contingency. I'm grateful that I finally did hire the right legal team. Ironically, 2 of my attorneys became mothers themselves during the long course of my lawsuit. But contingency does not mean free. I don't pay upfront for my attorney's fees, but I'm still responsible for many costs associated with the litigation, including deposition reporter fees, court filing fees, and expert witness fees. As of today, this lawsuit has cost me $56,000. I'm incredibly grateful to the American Association of University Women and the Solidarity Fund by Coworker for helping me cover some of these costs. Even with this help, I anticipate by the end of my trial, I will have spent over $100,000 of my own money holding Google accountable. By contrast, my former Google boss, the one named in my lawsuit who had a history of reported misconduct, was likely rewarded with a generous severance to leave Google following my and others' complaints, just like so many other Google executives in the past who engaged in misconduct. With Google's track record here, It's no wonder that Google's legal team is refusing to provide any details on the topic, claiming that the executive is protected by a confidentiality agreement she likely signed upon accepting a severance. She also receives free legal defense from the company, in addition to an external team of 3 attorneys Google's legal team hired for extra support. And unlike me, she doesn't appear to be struggling. On LinkedIn, my former boss publicly announced she's enjoying an early retirement to focus on, quote, yoga, baking, knitting, and time to be still. That sounds really nice. The toll this path has taken on my mental health, however, has been truly immeasurable. Last winter, amidst my lawsuit, full-time job, and caring for my 2 small children with frequent COVID daycare closures, I hit rock bottom. I hadn't slept more than a few hours a night in months. I also regularly woke up from nightmares with heart palpitations, and I sometimes experienced panic attacks right before logging into VC meetings for work. Google had twice subpoenaed my employment records for my new job at Facebook, and my story was in the news. So with so many eyes on my every move, I felt pressure to overperform. What if what had happened at Google happened again? The precious few hours when I wasn't working or caring for my children were spent responding to lengthy discovery requests. All of it felt re-traumatizing, and I was at a breaking point. I knew something had to change. So I made the difficult decision to check myself into an inpatient mental health facility for a 30-day treatment program. Leaving behind my husband, my 2 young children, and a new job in the midst of a pandemic was never something I could have imagined for myself, but I needed urgent care. While in treatment, I worked with a team of psychiatrists and mental health professionals to develop a plan and coping strategies. I'm still not the person I once was before all of this, but I'm trying to get there. It's scary for me to tell you this today, but I'm not ashamed of seeking help. And I know that Google's lawyers will try to use this information to smear me during my public trial. I'd prefer to tell my own story first. I told you all I'm a crier. I also recognize that I'm incredibly privileged to even have been able to receive mental health care in the first place. My family loaned me $55,000 for the facility's upfront costs, about a third of which was reimbursed by insurance. I was also lucky to have employment benefits allowing me to take medical leave. So many other workers or potential whistleblowers are not in the position to do what I did. And as a white, cisgendered, non-disabled woman in a dual income marriage, I enjoy protections that so many others facing discrimination, harassment, and retaliation do not. I know because I hear from them nearly every week. As a whistleblower, speaking out on the all too common experience of pregnancy discrimination, I'm regularly contacted by pregnant people and parents seeking my advice. I do everything I can to help them and recommend resources, but I don't always have the time for everyone, and I'm often limited by what I can say because of my lawsuit. For that, I feel immense guilt. Many whistleblowers, in addition to their own battles and activism, are also taking on the unpaid responsibility of becoming support channels to other whistleblowers. Whistleblowing may be an individual action, but it's one that we take on in service of others. It's about working to make sure no one else has to go through what we did. There's so much more I could share if I had the time. There's so much more I wish I could share if it weren't for the heavy layers of confidentiality that I'm bound by as a plaintiff in a lawsuit. And please know, I'm not telling you this so that you will feel sorry for me. I'm telling you this because things need to change. Whistleblowers deserve better. We need legal support, including assistance in finding the right legal representation and stronger protections under the law. We also need more funding to cover legal fees for plaintiffs in discrimination, harassment, and retaliation litigation. We desperately need more lawyers willing to do this work, which in its current state is not nearly as lucrative as other forms of law. We should have fellowships to encourage more law schools to teach employment discrimination studies, and we need more scholarships and loan forgiveness programs to encourage students to become plaintiffs' attorneys. Many attorneys don't pursue this line of work simply because the weight of their student loan debt prevents them from doing so. We also need resources and funding to help connect whistleblowers to the right mental health support. Being a whistleblower so often wreaks havoc on your mental and physical health. Care while we're in the fight is crucial for preventing chronic health problems and should not be a luxury available to only the privileged few. The experience of whistleblowing is a grueling one, and it doesn't stop even and when a lawsuit reaches its conclusion. Whistleblowers need funding to assist with their day-to-day expenses so they can support themselves and their families while healing from workplace trauma. But there has been some progress over the past few years, and for that I'm truly encouraged. The Silence No More Act is a real triumph, and I hope it will inspire other states to sponsor similar legislation. And there are now organizations like Lioness who do pro bono public relations work to help whistleblowers safely bring their stories to the world. I'm additionally happy to be able to refer people who contact me to new resources like the Tech Worker Handbook, a collection of information put together by Afomo Azoma and many others to guide tech workers before, during, and after the decision to speak out. And for anyone who has the means, I encourage you to contribute to the Solidarity Fund by coworker.org, a new fund that helped me and also helps other tech workers engage in activism for better workplaces. I'm grateful to all whistleblowers who have come before me. I continue to learn from and be inspired by them each day. And I know that not too long from now, we're all going to be tuning in to watch the next Francis or whistleblower we don't know yet testify before Congress. I'm sure I'll be tuning in along with you. I know they may look poised and confident and polished, and they are, but I challenge you to be mindful of the bigger picture. Know that you're not seeing the whole story, and know there are countless others who don't have the resources to take the same path. All of them need our support and our gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chelsey. I really appreciate you sharing with us your inspiring yet difficult struggle. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us and allowing yourself to be so vulnerable with us. I think it was a very powerful story and message, and just really appreciate you taking the time. One thing that you said really stuck with me. It was, I wrote it down as soon as you said it. I'm telling you this because things need to change. And I think many people are here listening to you because they want to change things. And And I think that's kind of all about what Alphabet Workers Union is about, is trying to make our workplace a better place. Now I wanted to kind of shift gears to a little bit of a discussion portion to talk with each other more about this issue of workplace harassment and discrimination and what we can do about it. As we very much know, harassment and discrimination in the workplace is rampant, and a large number of us have been affected by it. Looking at Chelsea's story, you can see how Google responded to her lived experiences. So we're going to split up into breakout rooms. We're going to have a short 15-minute discussion before coming back together to discuss some actions that we can take. I'm going to stop the recording because the discussions can be a bit sensitive. And for the record, these conversations are off the record and won't be shared with anyone outside of this group. Here's a preview of the discussion questions, but you'll have facilitators in each room to kind of help guide the conversation. Don't forget, please pick a person to report back after the discussion because you might be called upon to share what was discussed. So let me go ahead and open up the breakout rooms for about 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and discuss further. So one moment as things open up. Yeah, thank you for sharing. I totally agree with what folks have said about the importance of supporting each other and coming together as coworkers to demand something better. I know we're all here because we want to learn about Chelsea's experience, support her, and come up with ways to prevent this from continuing to happen. So here are a couple ways that you can fight to stop discrimination and harassment at Google, and wanted to share some resources here. So as always, you know, join our union, Alphabet Workers Union, if you haven't already. Is difficult to fight for justice as an individual, especially as, like with Chelsea's example, Google attempted to isolate her and individualize her story when we know that's not true. She isn't alone in her story or her fight, and that's what being in a union does. It unifies us. It gives us the leverage we need to create real change. For example, we recently launched a petition demanding pay parity for our TVC coworkers. If you're interested in learning more about AWU or have any questions or concerns you may have, you can always talk to a AWU member or fill out this Airtable form to stay in touch and learn more. You can also, these events, these Union Day events are open to all members of Alphabet, not just all workers of Alphabet, not just members of AWU. So talk to your coworkers about what we discussed today, Chelsea's story, and how together we can fight to make our workplace free of discrimination and harassment. We have another Union Day coming up in early November. It's called Perf Results Are Out, Now What? So you can talk about the perf system and how we can create a long-term change in our workplace to stop things like this from happening. So I just want to say once again, thank you so much to Chelsey for joining us and sharing your story. You can follow her on social media to stay up to date on her trial. I'm going to share a link here. I'll also be sharing this deck with folks after the event, so you have access to any of the links that we've posted here. Feel free to share it with any coworkers who weren't able to attend.